The attack surface is growing exponentially. Here's the math. In 2025, developers pushed nearly 1 billion commits to GitHub. In April 2026, GitHub COO posted that the platform is now processing 275 million commits per week, putting it on pace for 14 billion commits this year. That's a 14x increase in a single year. His parenthetical was telling, quote, "Spoiler alert, it won't stay linear." So what's driving it? AI coding agents. And the security implications of this growth curve are something every security leader needs to internalize right now. Let me put the numbers in context. The GitHub Octaverse 2025 report shows that the platform now has more than 150 million developers, over 36 million joined in just the last year alone, more than one new developer every second. Merge pull requests hit 43.2 million per month, up 23% year over year. GitHub Actions went from 500 million minutes per week in 2023 to a billion in 2025 to 2.1 billion minutes in a single week in April 2026. That's a quadrupling in 3 years. And the acceleration is almost entirely driven by AI agents. According to reporting from The Information, AI agent pull requests jumped from roughly 4 million in September to 17 million in March. The weekly frequency of code submissions using Claude Code alone increased nearly 25x in 6 months, from around 100,000 commits to over 2.5 million by late March 2026. Claude Code, Codex CLI, Cursor, Windsurf, and a growing ecosystem of alternatives have gone from curiosities to standard workflow components in less than a year. This is not an incremental growth, it's an exponential production curve, and every line of code that hits production is a line of code that has to be secured. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The relationship between code volume and attack surface is arithmetic. Industry research places software defect density at 5 to 20 defects per 1,000 lines of code. Even well-maintained, heavily audited open source projects land in the range of 1 to 5. Here's the kicker though. Research consistently shows that AI-generated code contains vulnerabilities at 2.74 times the rate of human-written code. CodeRabbit's 2025 report found that AI-generated code had 70% more errors, with errors that were more severe. AI co-authored code showed 1.7 times more major issues, misconfigurations were 75% higher, and security vulnerabilities appeared nearly triple the human baseline. And the code quality indicators are all moving in the wrong direction. Code churn is up 41%, code duplication has quadrupled, the kind of careful refactoring that keeps code bases healthy has collapsed from 25% of changed lines in 2021 to under 10% by 2024. So we're not just producing more code, we're producing more vulnerable code, faster, at a scale the industry has never seen before. A huge share of this growth is coming from a new class of developer. The Octaverse report showed that 80% of new developers use Copilot within their first week. Over 1.1 million public repositories now use an LLM SDK, with nearly 700,000 created in the last year alone. That's a 178% year-over-year growth rate. Many of these are what the industry calls quote-unquote vibe coders, building applications with natural language prompts and AI assistance, often without deep understanding of the code being generated or its security implications. AI-assisted commits show a 3.2% secret leak rate compared to 1.5% baseline, roughly doubling credential exposure. Georgia Tech tracked at least 35 new CVEs in March 2026 alone that were a direct result of AI-generated code, up from 6 in January and 15 in February. The trajectory alone should tell you something. Now, this isn't about blaming new developers. It's about recognizing that we're democratizing software creation without democratizing security knowledge. And the gap between those two curves is exactly where attackers will live. Both sides of the equation are accelerating. While the attack surface is expanding exponentially on the production side, the cost to find and exploit vulnerabilities on the offensive side is collapsing simultaneously. I covered this previously in my Mythos video, but the recap matters here. Anthropic's Claude Mythos found thousands of high-severity vulnerabilities across every major operating system and browser. Mowak, mother of all Kevs, demonstrated the first agentic AI workflow capable of exploiting hundreds of known dangerous vulnerabilities in minutes. Not discovering them, exploiting them. AI systems can now generate working CVE exploits in 10 to 15 minutes for approximately $1 per exploit. First is forecasting approximately 59,000 new CVEs in 2026, and 67% of exploited CVEs in 2026 are 0 days, up from 16% in 2018. The 0-day clock tracks this collapse. Median time from disclosure to first exploit went from 771 days in 2018 to 4 hours in 2024. In 2025, the majority of exploited vulnerabilities were weaponized before they were even disclosed. More code, more vulnerable code, cheaper exploitation, faster weaponization. These aren't parallel trends, they're converging. The defensive infrastructure that backs all this is also buckling. Here's where it gets really uncomfortable from the defender's perspective as well, and why I wanted to make a follow-up video. The defensive infrastructure we've been relying on for vulnerability management is starting to buckle under the weight of this growth. Let's start with NIST NVD, the National Vulnerability Database. In April of 2026, NIST announced that it is scaling back enrichment operations for the National Vulnerability Database. Going forward, NIST will prioritize enrichment for CVEs that appear on CISO's CAV, or Known Exploited Vulnerability Catalog, CVEs for software used within the federal government, and CVEs for critical software as defined by Executive Order 14028. Everything else gets categorized as quote-unquote not scheduled. And every CVE in the backlog with an NVD published date earlier than March 1st, 2026 just got moved into the quote-unquote not scheduled bucket. Think about what that means. NIST enriched nearly 42,000 CVEs in 2025, 45% more than any prior year. Submissions during the first 3 months of 2026 are already nearly 1/3 higher than the same period last year. NVD has been struggling with backlogs and enrichment delays for years now, and this isn't a triumphant announcement. This is the federal government openly acknowledging that it cannot keep pace with CVE volume, and that downstream consumers, vulnerability scanners, compliance tools, ticketing systems, CISO dashboards are going to have to figure out enrichment elsewhere. NIST even said in their own announcement that the new rules, quote-unquote, may not catch every potentially high-impact CVE. That's saying the quiet part out loud. And it's not just NVD. Madison Oliver, who leads the advisory database curation team at GitHub, published a piece showing that vulnerability reports to open source maintainers have grown roughly 4x from January to March 2026. 4x in 3 months. And this is on top of the flood of AI-generated slop reports that forced Daniel Stenberg to shut down Curl's HackerOne bug bounty program last year. Stenberg's numbers are brutal. Useful vulnerability reports dropped from 15% of submissions to just 5%. Several other popular bug bounty programs have paused or restructured their intake for the same reason. The signal-to-noise ratio has collapsed. So let me stack these up. AI is industrializing both the generation of vulnerable code and the discovery of vulnerabilities at a rate that defenders cannot match. The canonical source of vulnerability enrichment, NVD, is officially throwing in the towel on the long tail. Open source maintainers, who are the stewards of components running in 97% of commercial code bases, are being buried in reports they cannot triage. Bug bounty programs are pausing. The institutional scaffolding we've built in vulnerability management on for the past 2 decades is fracturing at exactly the moment the attack surface is expanding the fastest. So what does this mean for security leaders? First, vulnerability management programs need to accept that they will never scan, triage, patch their way to safety of these volumes. Prioritization based on exploitability, reachability, and business context is not a nice to have. It's the only viable operating model moving forward. And with NVD formally advocating enrichment for non-KEVs, non-federal CVEs, operations cannot assume the data they rely on will be there in any meaningful way. You need alternative enrichment sources, commercial threat intelligence, CISA KEV, EPSS, reachability tooling, and you need them wired into your workflow now. Secondly, security guardrails need to move into the development workflow itself. When 80% of new developers are using AI coding assistants in their first week, controls need to be embedded in those same tools and pipelines. Policy as code, inline enforcement, runtime governance, not after-the-fact scanning. I've been talking about AI-generated AppSec and auto-remediation in recent videos, and this is exactly why. The only way to keep pace with AI-generated code is with AI-integrated security. Thirdly, and I think this is the hardest one for the industry to accept, your attack surface is no longer something you can fully inventory, let alone fully secure. The volume of code, the velocity of production, and the proliferation of AI-generated components mean that risk management, not risk elimination, is the only realistic framing. And it's why resilience has become such a central theme in security leadership conversations. When prevention breaks down at this scale, the ability to detect, contain, recover, and learn becomes the differentiator. So the vulnapocalypse I wrote about is not a future state, it's the present. And the growth curves are steepening. The code is exploding, the exploitation is collapsing, and the defensive infrastructure, NVD, bug bounty programs, open source maintainers are all starting to break under the load. That's not a pessimistic take, it's just the data. So I go much deeper on all this in my latest article, The Attack Surface Exponential on Resilient Cyber. I'd also recommend Madison Oliver's piece on what the maintainer data is actually telling us, and NIST's own announcement on the NVD changes. All those will be linked below. As always, like, subscribe, share with your colleagues. These conversations matter, and I'll see you in the next one.